I almost lost my first ever commercial building over a $40,000 HVAC system. So picture this, I'm standing in this completely empty second floor, staring at this maze of ancient ductwork, and my wife's with me, and she's excited. She's like, oh, can you imagine this front part could be my little office? And I'm just thinking about dollar signs the whole time. See, what you might not know is that I'm considering buying my first commercial property. It's kind of like the dream one that I've always had my eye on. It's right on Main Street. Now, I have a solid residential portfolio already, over $1 million worth. But I always thought commercial was, for some reason, just out of reach. But thanks to my friend Josh, who invited me to this commercial real estate conference last year, some of you might remember that from my previous video, I started to get into it. I'm not like all the way into it yet, but I'm starting to be. So for this video, fair warning, this is a numbers video, and what I want to tell you might change the way you look at this problem property, because for me it did. So now you see this number on the screen. This is what most investors would get in tax savings every single year for a property like this. But this number here is what can happen after something called cost segregation. So if you watched my other video about 179D tax deductions, 45L tax credits, don't worry, this is different. What I'm talking about is basically the foundation of all those other tax strategies. So you didn't need to see that video to understand this one. Going back to me standing in that building, I'm walking through it, and I'm kind of thinking this might be the last time. I'm done. There's just too much work to be done. It's too old. The upstairs is, it needs to be completely modernized. But my wife is still kind of looking around. The sun's shining through the old windows. There's dust floating in the air. And I'm just mentally adding up like all the problems. So there's this $40,000 ancient HVAC system that would need to be replaced. I'm estimating another $25,000 for electrical work, probably, I don't know, $30,000 for other like envelope style repairs. And I think I mentioned it, but that second floor it needs to be completely set up in a way that would be functionable, not just for one possible tenant, but multiple tenants. And I told you already, I really like this building. I drive past it. I have this vision, bakery business, aesthetics business for my wife, YouTube sound stage studio for me, maybe even this co-working space for other like-minded professionals. And all of that would just be on that empty second floor, because the first floor, it already has a great anchor tenant. It's this learning center that helps kids get tutoring for math and reading. And they're locked in with a triple net lease, at least for a couple more years, and they have plans to stay, which is great. So that second floor is where our dreams could really kind of begin to take shape. But back to the numbers. It would take a lot of money on top of the purchase price just to make all of this happen, all of this a reality. So of course, I set up a meeting for later in the week with my accountant, Jeff. Now he loves me. We text all the time. I meet with him, outside of tax season. And when I'm texting him to set up the meeting, he says, don't walk away just yet. Let's look at the numbers. So I show up at Jeff's office. I'm a numbers guy. I'm like, Jeff, lay it on me. What are these numbers? And he goes over to the whiteboard. He grabs a dry erase marker, and he draws this triangle. He calls it a pyramid. And he says, look, most investors think building is like just one thing, right? But the IRS, they see hundreds of little components, an envelope around the structure. And it's in those details, in all those little things, where the magic happens. So he starts this list on the side, breaking it all down. He writes basic building structure, 39 years depreciation. I mentioned the electrical. He writes electrical system, plumbing system, 15 years depreciation. He writes down like fixtures, finishes, 7 years, carpeting, some appliances, 5 years, land improvements, parking lots, 15 years, personal property items, 5-7 years. It's like, okay, this is a big list, but Jeff, what am I looking at? And he goes, well, this is what most people miss. He starts circling all this on the whiteboard. He goes, if you don't get a cost segregation study, then you're stuck depreciating everything for commercial real estate over 39 years. And most of this stuff, like on the list, it obviously won't last that long. So really, this is the most basic rule of how commercial real estate and depreciation works. But what Jeff is saying is there's more to it than all of that. So I told you this is a numbers video, so let me show you some real numbers. First off, that $40,000 HVAC system that I was worried about, normal depreciation would be about $1,025. It's a tax deduction per year for 39 years. But if you perform a cost segregation study, that could be $8,000 just in year one. And then if you're getting the study done, that's just the beginning. Like I said, Jeff was listing out things that I'd never even thought of before. If I'm really going to put in a YouTube studio, then there might be specialized electrical work. That's a 15-year depreciation. For my wife's, bakery, or for the aesthetics business, we're talking 7-year depreciation for, the cabinetry, the parking lot, the striping, special flooring, wall coverings. All of that has different depreciation schedules, anywhere from 5, 7, sometimes even 15 years. And so if you're wrapping your head around what I'm saying, because this got me smiling along with sort of nodding, I'm like, well, yeah, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So then Jeff looks at me and he goes, well, have you heard about bonus depreciation? And I was completely lost. I must have had that look on my face because he didn't even let me answer. He just laughs for a quick second and he goes, well, that's where it gets really good. So at the time of this recording, that's when I met with Jeff, you can take 40% bonus depreciation on some of these shorter life components within commercial real estate. Now there's some urgency here because next year that's supposed to drop to 20%. And then the following year, it's completely gone. So I'm looking at Jeff. I'm like, Jeff, I need the real numbers. Tell me, but show me too. So he goes back to the whiteboard and starts working up the numbers. That $40,000 HVAC system without cost segregation, like I said before, gets you the $1,025 tax deduction the first year. But with cost segregation, you get the up to $8,000 tax deduction the first year. Add the bonus depreciation, and you could get an additional $3,200 in year one. So potentially, that first year tax deduction could be $11,200 total just for that one component. Now, some of you might remember Sarah. She's this commercial real estate investor. I mentioned her in another video. Well, she told me that it took her way too many years to learn about all this stuff. And it probably cost her over $100,000 in tax savings that she can never get back. But for me, here's where my story gets even better. And it's where I learned about a mistake that could cost me even more. Jeff has this employee, Emma. She works across the hall, and the doors are always open. I tease her a little bit. She's always eavesdropping, and she yells over. She's like, "Oh, tell Rich about my sister Jessica." So Jessica is a dentist, right? She owns her own practice, and she and her husband have been investing in commercial real estate for the past few years, just on the side. Emma's like, "Yeah, Jessica almost made a huge mistake last year. Did the cost segregation, got all excited about the tax savings, and then almost couldn't use most of it." So I'm all in at this point. I'm like, okay, well, what's up with Jessica? Jeff turns and says, well, passive income trap, because she's a full-time dentist. So I'm confused. Back to the whiteboard. He starts explaining that real estate is just Jessica's side investment because she has her own dental practice. So her real estate, losses or deductions were considered passive. And really what this means is she could only offset passive income. So I wasn't really following Jeff at this point in the story. So he goes on to explain to me a little bit better. Jessica makes most of her money through the dental practice. And when you compare that money to her real estate, income, it's disproportionate. So I guess the way you got to think about it is it kind of breaks down into two sides. On one side, you've got active income, that's W-2 jobs, business income, self-employment earnings. So that's basically everything Jessica earns from her dental practice. And then over here on the other side, you have her, quote, passive income. And that means we're talking about her rental income or other real estate investments where she's not actively involved in all the day-to-day. But here's the clever part, Jeff says. Jessica's husband is a stay-at-home dad who also actively manages all the real estate properties. properties. When they sat down together and did the math with Emma, Jessica's husband spends way more than 750 hours per year with the tenants, with dealing with the repairs, the bookkeeping, all the improvements. Therefore, he could qualify as a real estate professional. Now, sometimes you're going to see that listed out as like REPS, like real estate professional status. So I'm sitting in this meeting. I got Jeff over here by the whiteboard. I got Emma behind me, and I feel like I'm surrounded by geniuses at this point because I'm learning kind of what maybe you're learning right now too, that 750 hours a year equals, no more than maybe 15 hours per week. And in order to get that status, that real estate professional status, all those work hours have to be, more than half, more than 50% of your total working hours. And you have to actively be participating in all these real estate activities. So the IRS, the government, they set all that up. But if you get real estate professional status, you now have the ability to use all those losses, all those deductions against any income. You see what I'm saying? Including the income from Jessica's dental practice. So that one distinction, that one change meant Jessica and her husband could use over $200,000 in depreciation deductions against not only their passive real estate income, but their regular income too. There wasn't going to be the typical waiting years to use up all these tax savings that just keep getting carried forward. So if you're like me, that was a lot to digest, to be honest. But again, I do a lot of good thinking when I'm driving by myself. And on the way home from that appointment with Jeff, I was sort of mentally walking through that building again. And I pictured that ancient HVAC system. Before I thought it was a big problem, but maybe it's massive tax savings now. I think I mentioned the envelope of the property, old windows. Those could be tax incentives, maybe part of making the building more energy efficient. Really, every problem that scared me now sort of had this bright side to it. And it's funny, Jeff, he actually gave me homework, an actual checklist of items to look for on the property. Number 1, building components, check. That's HVAC, electrical, plumbing. Number 2, land improvements, check. Parking lots, landscaping, outdoor lighting, signage. Number 3, personal property, check. That's carpeting, window treatments, security systems. So as I'm doing this mental inventory, it's funny because I'm thinking to myself, right now, I almost didn't make this video. I thought it was just going to be too in the weeds, too many numbers. But I remember how I felt standing in that second floor empty, building, dusty, ready to walk away from this opportunity because in all honesty, I didn't understand the numbers. So I'm glad I created this video for you and for me. And I have some guidance if you need to figure out cost segregation for your own properties. And I'll leave a link down below in the description to help get you on the right path. So check that one out. And drop me just the word, ready, all caps in the comments if you're looking at commercial real estate a little differently after watching this. I read every comment, so I would appreciate that. And honestly, I'm just trying to help as many people get started with cost segregation because this is a new thing for me. And I think it's going to help me and hopefully it helps you. Oh, and if you are interested in learning more about the 179D tax deductions, I also mentioned the 45L tax credits. I'll leave a link to a video. I think it's going to be right here, so go check that out.